Imagine this. Your daughter throws a big, beautiful wedding, no alcohol, just like the family wanted. But weeks later, whispers start. A secret bar, hidden drinks, and now the family's in turmoil. If you were the mother, how would you feel? Let me tell you what really happened and why it's tearing them apart. You know how some weddings feel like they came straight out of a fairy tale? That's what this one was. The bride, a 27-year-old woman we'll call Emily, had always dreamed of a beautiful, big celebration. Her husband, Josh, 29, was more laid back, but he supported her vision completely. They booked a stunning event hall with a garden and private rooms, invited nearly 300 guests, and poured their hearts and wallets into creating a day to remember. But here's the twist. Both Emily and Josh come from deeply conservative religious families. We're talking the kind of families where even a glass of wine at dinner raises eyebrows. So when planning the wedding, there was one non-negotiable. It had to be a dry wedding, no alcohol, not even champagne for toasts. Emily agreed. At least that's what she told everyone. She wasn't trying to be rebellious. She just wanted to make everyone happy, especially her parents, who had very strong views on alcohol. Announcing a dry wedding seemed like the best way to avoid conflict. And for the older relatives, it was a relief. They felt respected, heard, and even proud that the young couple honored tradition. But let's not forget, weddings are expensive, especially when you're paying most of it yourselves, like Emily and Josh were. Between the venue, food, decor, and everything else, the costs were stacking up fast. Emily started looking for creative ways to offset a few of those expenses. And that's when the idea hit her. What if there was a way to quietly let the younger, more relaxed guests have a drink, without upsetting the rest of the family? She remembered her old college friend who was now a licensed bartender. With the venue having some private side rooms, the plan came together. Emily decided to set up a VIP bar, a secret little speakeasy for the cool cousins, friends, and people who wouldn't make a fuss. She invited about 75 of them privately, told them where to find it, and made sure the drinks were reasonably priced. $5 for a beer, $8 for a cocktail. Nothing wild. Just enough to cover some of the catering costs if it worked. And it did work. People were discreet, respectful, and even a little excited. It felt like they were in on a fun little secret. Emily and her bartender friend ended the night with around $2,000, which took a decent chunk off their wedding bill. No one got drunk, no one caused a scene. Most of the wedding, especially the older guests, had no idea anything unusual was happening. For Emily, it felt like a win. She respected the public rules, kept the peace, and found a creative way to handle the financial pressure. But what she didn't know was that someone had overheard a conversation, and the fallout was coming. For a while, everything stayed under the radar. The wedding ended, the photos came back beautiful, and Emily thought they had pulled it off perfectly. The couple even joked privately that their wedding had a fun twist no one would ever know about. But then, the whispers began. It started innocently enough. A cousin mentioned the bar in a group text. Another friend casually brought it up in a family conversation, thinking everyone already knew. And that's when it all unraveled. One of Emily's aunts overheard the chatter at a family dinner. She didn't say anything at the time, but a few days later, Emily got a phone call from her mum. It started polite, but the tone shifted quickly. Her mum asked, "Did you lie to all of us?" Emily tried to explain it wasn't meant to be disrespectful. It was private, small, and no one was forced to do anything. But her mum wasn't hearing it. She said the entire thing was a betrayal, that Emily had mocked the values they tried so hard to pass on. "You made a fool out of us," her mum said, nearly in tears. Then came the call from her mother-in-law. She didn't raise her voice, but her words cut deep. "You manipulated the situation to get what you wanted. That's not how family works." What hurt most was how personal it all felt. This wasn't just about some beers and cocktails. It was about trust, pride, and generations of unspoken expectations. Emily felt like she was suddenly on trial, not just for what she did, but for who she was becoming. To her, it had been a compromise. Respect the family publicly, but make space for the friends who'd flown in expecting to celebrate. But her elders, it was deception, plain and simple. They felt tricked and humiliated. Josh, her husband, found himself caught in the crossfire. He hadn't known about the VIP bar beforehand, and when the news broke, he was stunned. He didn't yell or blame Emily, but he did admit he felt left out of a major decision. He said that if he'd known, he probably would have asked her not to go through with it, just to avoid the family fallout. And that was the hardest part for Emily. She didn't regret the bar itself, no one was hurt, and it had genuinely helped them financially, but she did regret not telling Josh. The silence created a divide not only with the family, but between them. What began as a clever solution now looked, in the eyes of many, like a selfish act. The secret had slipped out, and so had a lot of trust. After the initial shock settled, Emily found herself in a strange and painful place, caught between two very different versions of herself. On one hand, she was the daughter raised in a strict, faith-centered household where obedience and family honor came before individual choices. On the other hand, she was now a woman, building a life in a very different world, one where choices had to be practical, and compromise was often the only way forward. She didn't plan to deceive anyone. She truly believed the secret bar was a smart middle ground. But the backlash forced her to reevaluate everything, not just the decision itself, but the gap between how she was raised and the life she was actually living. Family gatherings became tense. Some relatives avoided eye contact. Her mother only spoke to her through short, clipped sentences. Her mother-in-law, once warm and welcoming, now sounded cold and disappointed on every call. And yet her friends, especially the ones who had attended the VIP bar, kept reaching out with praise and thanks. "That was the best wedding I've ever been to," one said. Another told her, "Honestly, it made the night feel special, like we were part of something just for us." Emily started to wonder, were the values she was being punished for breaking really hers to begin with? Or had she been trying to live up to expectations that no longer fit? Even her husband Josh was struggling with that same tension. He wanted to stand by his family, but he also didn't want to see his wife publicly shamed for a decision that, when you really looked at it, hurt no one. And financially, the move had been helpful. Their catering invoice had been reduced thanks to the $2,000 they made. That was real. That mattered. One night, after another difficult phone call with his mother, Josh sat down with Emily and said something she'd been needing to hear. "I think you were trying to take care of everyone, me, the guests, even our families, and maybe the way you did it wasn't perfect, but your heart was in the right place." That moment gave her a little peace, but it didn't solve everything. The emotional distance between her and her parents remained, and for the first time in her life, Emily began asking herself, what happens when doing what's right for you means disappointing the people who raised you? It was a question without a simple answer, but it was the beginning of a bigger conversation about values, independence, and what it truly means to grow up. In the weeks that followed, Emily tried to repair the damage. She called her mother again, this time not to defend herself, but simply to listen. She didn't justify what she did. She didn't argue. She just said, "I understand why you're hurt." And for the first time since the fallout, her mother didn't hang up. The conversation was strained, but it was something, a small step. Emily also reached out to her mother-in-law, writing a handwritten note instead of calling. She apologized for not including Josh in the decision and acknowledged how it might have felt like a breach of trust. It wasn't easy to be that vulnerable, but she hoped the gesture would soften the tension. A week later, she received a short but kind response. "Thank you for your note. I appreciate your honesty." But something had shifted permanently. The wedding, which should have been remembered as a joyful beginning, now carried the weight of controversy. Family dinners were no longer relaxed. The smiles were still there, but they didn't reach the eyes. No one brought up the bar again, but its ghost lingered in every polite silence. Emily and Josh, meanwhile, were growing stronger as a couple. They'd had hard conversations about values, boundaries, communication. They started couples therapy, not because they were in crisis, but because they both realized how much pressure they were carrying from the expectations of others. Therapy gave them the space to speak freely, to understand one another without judgment, and in that process, Emily began to forgive herself, not just for the bar, but for the years she'd spent trying to please everyone else. One afternoon in therapy, Emily said something that surprised even her. "I think I needed this to happen. I think it was the first time I stopped being the good daughter and started being myself." That realization didn't make the pain go away, but it gave it meaning. In time, relationships with the family began to shift again, not back to what they were, but forward into something more honest. Her parents didn't fully agree with her choices, but they began to respect that she was making her own. And Emily, in turn, stopped seeking approval for every step she took. Peace, she learned, doesn't always look like agreement. Sometimes, peace is just learning to live with difference and still choosing love. Now, months later, Emily doesn't see the secret bar as a mistake, but as a moment that changed her life. Not because of the money they made or the controversy it stirred, but because it forced her to look inward, to ask, whose life am I living? She knows now that you can love your family deeply and still disagree with them. You can honor where you came from and still choose a different path. And sometimes, growing up means letting go of the version of you that everyone expects and embracing the person you've quietly become. Emily and Josh are doing well. Their marriage, once tested by silence and misunderstanding, is now rooted in trust and open communication. They still have awkward dinners and quiet moments with the family, but those moments don't define them anymore. What defines them is the life they're building together, one decision at a time. And as for the VIP bar, it's become something of a legend among their friends. Not because it broke the rules, but because it brought people together in a way that felt real, joyful, and human. A little messy, sure, but isn't that what life is? So if you've ever felt torn between tradition and truth, or if you've ever made a choice that others didn't understand, let this story remind you. Growth is rarely graceful, but it's always worth it. And hey, before we wrap up, I've got a simple question for you. Have you ever done something small that caused a big reaction? Maybe it was a quiet decision that changed everything, or a harmless moment that others just didn't get. Tell me in the comments. I'd love to hear it. And if you enjoyed this story, give it a like, follow the podcast, and share it with someone who could use a little reminder that it's okay to take the path that feels right to you.